This podcast episode is sponsored by ChiefAIOfficer.com, offering training and certification through the International Association of Chief AI Officers. Interested in a new career or leveling up your value in the marketplace? ChiefAIOfficer.com can help. Welcome to Using AI at Work. I'm your host, Chris Nagle. Each week, we'll be learning how today's business owners, entrepreneurs, and ambitious professionals are getting more done with smart use of tomorrow's tech. Let's get started. Greetings, esteemed audience. Today we have, actually, it's an interesting arrangement. Matt is a member of the Chief AI Officer community, which is the parent of Using AI at Work podcast. And we've had the chance to have a couple of conversations. And I found it very interesting and fascinating the direction that he's taking AI. It's a broad topic, and there's a number of ways that we can use it. But our guest today, Matt Ivey, is the founder of Dyslexic.AI. And Matt's here to talk to us about kind of his experience with using AI as a neurodivergent individual and the benefits and challenges that have come with that. So, Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it. It's great times that we live in, and I'm excited to chat with you.
So I'd like to dive in. I know that you and I have had a few conversations prior to this, but I'm really curious kind of what brought you to where you are with Dyslexic AI and kind of what your intentions are with that and just what that journey's been like.
Yeah, well, it's been a fun journey the last couple of years. I was going through a transition with business and life and was doing a lot of research on my own about different ways of communicating better for myself personally. So, and that started with the business and then led on more of a personal development side too. But I found ChatGPT immediately kind of upon moving from micro business management of gyms to coaching and consulting. I was trying to test my ability to share my thoughts, and being an outside the box thinker, I was really struggling. I really struggled major with typing. And so I stumbled on some of these tools at a time when I couldn't get my thoughts out in any other way than a whiteboard and a pad of paper. And that was when I was having kind of one of those aha moments that this was beyond the typical conversations that people were having about these tools. And that kind of just got my curiosity sparked. And I immediately kind of started diving into how can I use this set of tools and apps that were being released in a way that was going to benefit myself, which made me realize the more that I was doing that research there was a lot of other people that were like me that maybe weren't using the tools in a typical way. So that's kind of what sparked the Dyslexic AI conversation from the beginning. It was really about using LLMs in a way that was curated or created to benefit neurodivergent and dyslexic thinkers. And so I started writing an newsletter. I thought that was going to be a once a month type of process. I wasn't even sure that I was going to do it more than a couple. And I got really excited about it. Using the tools, I started creating it just about daily. And so I've created a couple hundred newsletters on the subject. And that was, I was in a transition place where I was able to just immerse myself in these tools and these conversations, and stumbled on a lot of great people that are having the same conversations. And that's kind of what led us having our discussions. And so anyways, that's where I'm at now. I'm going in a lot of different directions with it. It's an exciting place to be. And with my line of lateral thinking, it allows me to go in a lot of different places and circle back and find some commonalities between all these different topics, which is awesome.
I'd love to know more about how ChatGPT, there's, all kinds of use cases. Most people are starting with content and stuff like that. But how has ChatGPT supported you?
Well, it's changed constantly, honestly. And that's what I love about it. So when I first started There was kind of two pieces that really made my life easier. One was I wanted to create sort of an ebook or a longer format content. And so I was able to do that by continually prompting. I'm a guy that likes to ask Google questions. So if somebody can't figure out the question on Google in work or in home life or the kids or whatever, I was the first person to hop in there and ask, what did you search? How did you search it? Let's go research it. And so I love changing that set of logic and questions and reasonings to get answers. And I'm very curious and a lifelong learner. And so I started with the idea of how can I just have a conversation around this technology and how this technology works with dyslexic thinkers. And so I was able to create, 100 to 200 pages worth of content. And then I was able to go, okay, well, now that I have this content, I want to be able to break it down into 12 chapters because I'm a big fan of Hero's Journey. So I was stuck on Hero's Journey. How can I apply Hero's Journey to this conversation? And so I broke it into 12 chapters. That triggered a thing of like, well, there's 12 months in the year. I could release each chapter as a monthly newsletter. And so then that turned into, well, now I've got 52 newsletters, but instead of 52 weeks of content, I really have 52 days of content because I'm ready to go. Once my brain, my ADHD kicked in with my dyslexic mind, it was like, okay, hammer down. What's stopping me now from just posting these? And I'll tell you right now what it is. It's scheduling because I've been terrible at it and I let it go. So that leads to another thing of, how do I take all this and put it into a format that I can see. And I like to see it in graphs and charts or like a spreadsheet. And so how can I create like a content matrix of what I'm doing so I can keep track of these conversations that I'm having now? And at this point, I'm blowing myself away because I wouldn't even write an email or a text message to loved ones or family or business people because when I go to type, my brain just shuts down. I make so many mistakes. I did a paragraph in one of my articles and there was 26 mistakes in the first paragraph and I'm going back and trying to fix it. So enter the voice command where I was using some of these other tools. I use a tool called Vnote.AI and it's great for taking notes. And then it will ask you a series of questions and prompts to help you think more laterally. Or laterally and be able to put it into like a linear format. So it was like a way of like taking these random thoughts and ideas that I would have really quick in notes, and then it would organize them in a way that I could share those with other people that didn't think the way that I did. What really was the magic, it was once that voice stopped, or once those voice tools kicked in really good, and you've got the 11 labs and some of the other programs that are just focused on this tool itself. But once that got better, I really just went to voice for everything. And so that was another huge groundbreaking moment for me where I don't have to fix these errors. I do prefer to talk. I'm not necessarily better at talking. It's the way that I can communicate efficiently and effectively. So I was the guy that would do the bare minimum at work. If I had a big report and I knew I had to send it off to somebody. If I got that from somebody else, it would be 2 or 3 big paragraphs or pages of behind the scenes information, all the stuff that you need to know, and then the report. I was the guy that would say, here's the report. And then I would call you and say, hey, this is what's going on in this situation. Yeah. I would find you at the water cooler. I would do it in different ways. When I started to work for myself, and my ex at the time and we bought a gym and had for the last 15 years ran a kids fitness facility.
Nice.
And so I was a stay-at-home dad during that time too. So I was running the back end of the business and a stay-at-home dad. And so I found ways to communicate through my wife, and I did everything through her. That was the same thing I did with my mom and my sister. And growing up, I found ways around my limitations. And so when I found this set of tools that allowed me to take my limitations and kind of level the playing field, first it was like, I don't want anybody to know. not that I was embarrassed about it, but it was like, okay, cool. Like, hey, I can create this stuff. Um, and now I feel like, hey, this is awesome. I don't need to tell everybody I'm using this. And then I immediately went to the teacher kind of coach mentality that is in my nature. And I just wanted to share it with everybody. I just wanted to say, hey, look, this is amazing what these tools can do for
Yeah.
me. And if they can do that, and my premise really has been, if these tools can do this for me, if I can do this, and Matt Ivey can create this content or do any of these things in business, and anybody can do it, because I allowed myself to be limited by so many things in the past that these tools have allowed me to have the opportunity to now do that. I just want that for everybody.
Well, what does that look like for you working with the models? Because I know, like for me, I have an idea, I type it out, I go back and forth with the models. I don't use the voice modality too much. If I'm driving, if I'm out, jogging or something like that, I might have a back and forth session. Um, but I don't use it a ton. What does your usage look like?
My overall usage is all over the place. So I bounce back and forth. The main tools, the main stack, I'm going ChatGPT to Claude for a lot of my actual content of writing, Perplexity for my research. I couldn't survive without Grammarly. Grammarly is running in the background for me for
Yeah, that
everything.
makes
I
sense.
love the way it and that's for a dyslexic guy. And so, but it's really fascinating because I love language, and so, and I love math. I love the concepts of math, but both of those things I struggle with in my brain processing how I see them and how I can put them in paper or to pen. So I go back and forth constantly between those sets of tools. When I'm using voice, um, what I've come to find most often is that these tools enjoy conversations. So there's
Yes.
two ways that I'm using it. One is I'm going to be very specific, and I'm going to be very short and concise, and I'm going to give it, a very specific prompt because I'm looking for a very specific answer. I, with the way my brain works, is I've got a lot of ideas. So I want to have a conversation with any of these tools that'll allow me to do it in voice. And it's like, hey, I want to talk about something that a lot of people aren't talking about. It's neurodivergent, AI technology, dyslexia, education, how that applies to business, and my daughter's dyslexic and my son is neurodivergent. So how does that apply to school and the future of AI? And let's have a conversation about that really quick. And I just take this conversation that I'm having right now, and I share it with it. And it's amazing because it'll have the conversation back with me. And
Yeah.
obviously there's going to be different replies for every time somebody does a prompt, but the more you have a conversation with it, the more varied of responses you can get. And so it's really allowed me to then play devil's advocate, go back and forth, and that type of conversation, that type of communicating is how I'm most efficient. It's not that way for a lot of people, but for me personally, I'd rather have the conversation really quick and explain it. And I found that those tools pick up on that just as easy as it. If I go in and I type it now, I don't go
Sure.
back and fix my grammatical errors. I don't spell check it. I don't do anything. I was doing this actually as a demo yesterday with some people, and I was panicking and freezing because I was coaching them and I had to type into the window, and I knew I was making a mistake on every word. As soon as that fear and anxiety kicked in, I froze and I just went, screw it. I'm going to type every word wrong, and I just went through it really quick. It knew everything that I said right. It's
Crazy.
like
Yeah.
1% of the times it doesn't. And when you go back and read, and I know you're a big proponent of this like 10-80-10 rule
Yeah.
of, going in and messing with it for 10, letting it the computer have 80% of the conversation. And then the last part is that and actually that last 10%, I could argue, is almost like the most difficult 10%, because you've got to go in there and you've got to find those little errors and those little things that are wrong and fix them and put your tone on it. And so it's like the finished work. It's like the carpentry work.
Yeah.
You think that a job's going to take, that 80% goes by really fast, but it's that last little bit that nobody wants to do to clean up,
Yeah.
to make it all perfect, to finish it off. Those are the pieces that you have to figure out. And so it's allowed me to have those conversations up to that point, and then really just focus on that last 10% that I dislike, which is taking that conversation and picking it apart in a way that my brain doesn't want to do it, which is not through conversation, which is putting it into a format that other people want to consume it. And so that's really what this has allowed me to do, is instead of just like this example of this format of this podcast, if you have this transcript now, and then you can do things with this transcript,
Yeah.
it's awesome for a guy like me, because I don't have to go repeat myself. I don't have to go take that. I can go take this conversation, and I run everything through a note taker, whether it's Otter or Fathom or Fireflies. I'm a fan of all of those tools. So all of that content and those things are saved. And so then I'm taking those conversations and running those conversations through ChatGPT. And anyways, so I use it in a wide variety of ways, but I have found that if I can use the voice to text feature, I'm doing that 99% of the time now.
So, it seems like it would be the easiest way to communicate with the models. We talk every day. However, I don't find it particularly easy. It's a little frustrating for me because I'm not able to just ramble off my thoughts. Sometimes I need to pause, right? And the models will start processing. I'm like, whoa, 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 I'm not done yet. So what has that learning curve been like for you, from starting with, oh, wow, there's this new modality, to actually it being your primary communication channel for the models?
That was frustrating, but I will say that for me, typing was a frustration that people didn't
Yeah.
understand. That spell check was a frustration people didn't understand. So um, it was really hard at first. I used Dragon and some of the other headsets
Yeah.
back in the day that they tried to help me with when I was going back to college, and it didn't work well. We have a dozen different Alexa models that we've had over the years, or products that we've had with the kids, and tried all those things, and they were terrible as well. It's gotten exponentially better. Tools like the Vnote.AI, I started using that tool, and you can pause whenever you want. It's
Ah,
awesome at allowing you to do that. It is designed to allow you to pause. So when I'm pausing it and I'm having this live conversation right now, it doesn't translate super well to these models. I'll admit that. So, but those moments are really easy to pick out of a conversation for me when I'm reverse analyzing it. So when you do see that you were stumbling on some words, or that it just doesn't make sense in the context, when you can take that language and then you can see the video next to it, what it does is it saves me time. Like, I don't have to go back to my assistant to say, what did you mean here? Or my assistant doesn't have to go back to Matt to say, what did you mean here? If this transcript doesn't make sense, because they can apply the video and the context to it. Another one of these things where it was super helpful for me the other day was I was having a conversation just like this. We had the background text running, so it was live, and it's
yeah.
latency is like 1 second, right? And the guy's video froze, so he was frozen, and it kept freezing. It was only freezing for like 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And every time I normally would had to have gone and stopped and said, "Hey man, you're frozen," whatever. Most of the times I wouldn't even admit it. I would just and go on with the conversation. If I didn't get it, because I've lived my whole life that way. If I didn't understand, then I would reverse engineer questions to go back to what I didn't understand without them knowing. But in this case, when he was freezing, the running conversation wasn't freezing. And so I was able to just read his words really quick off of what it was and not stop the conversation. That was how I was starting to use this tool, and how I was encouraging my daughter as a student to use this tool when she didn't understand something, was instead of like being embarrassed to raise your hand or not raising your hand or not asking a question. Now you've got this quick little, tutor in your pocket that you can ask this question. So there was that portion. And then I did want to say, earlier that, or there was two uses, and the other was just this social emotional piece for me. I do want to add that in there because I think it's under talked about right now and misunderstood often. And so I was able to, through the conversations, find it much easier to have a social kind of emotional connection to the conversation. I was able to get it to play devil's advocate when I needed it to play devil's advocate. I was able to get it to poke holes in my theories. I was able to get it to support me when I felt like nobody else was. Why isn't anybody supporting this project? Why doesn't anybody see it from my perspective? And then, hey, why am I not seeing it from their perspective? And I was able to have those conversations. And while it's not something that I'm going to go and take advice necessarily like from my doctor or my counselor or my therapist, I will say that it allowed me to get feelings and emotions out and go back and forth in a way that I needed and was beneficial for me. And sometimes people need to get things out by typing and they
Yeah.
can move on. Some people, it's by writing in their journal and their diaries. And then sometimes it's just by expressing it and talking it, and then you can move on. And so just by being able to say this out loud in a way into the tool was sort of a social emotional component release for me that I found a lot of help in. So again, that was my, hey, is this an outside the box conversation? Is this a neurodivergent tendency? Or is this something that everybody can benefit from? So all of these conversations that I've been having under the lens of neurodivergent versus neurotypical or lateral versus linear thinking, I think they apply to both, honestly. And that's the cool thing about these tools is that it allows us an opportunity for two different types of thinking lines of thought to be able to have a conversation. So going back to like the note-taking tools and being able to say, I want to have this conversation, but now I need to change the context of how having it for my ex-wife versus my boss versus my friends. Those are all different conversations and different tones that we have. And so for me, it was that natural language way of saying it was much easier for me to get it to process than it was for me to try to type it out. I just ran into the same problems where I would struggle to type it into the ChatGPT in the first place. So I just went back to it. I don't care how many the conversation twists I have. I found it does a good job of figuring that out for me. So I'm also been training it the whole time. So it's like other parts of the model. I think that the more you use the voice, the more you use those, the better it's going to be at recognizing it.
If you're enjoying this episode and want to learn more about how to start using AI at work, we've made it easy for you. For just $1, you can have full access to the Chief AI Officer community, which will give you additional training, custom software, daily training calls on AI tools, using AI automations, getting more from your ChatGPT sessions, and the business of being an AI consultant. Simply go to chiefaiofficer.com/insiders to accelerate your AI journey. Now, back to the episode. A couple of things, I'd never really considered it before, but talking to even a professional or whatever, as humans, there's always going to be this, like, you're kind of filtering because you don't want to, like, you're understanding that the other person has the potential to judge you, right? And with the models, like, I don't know if that's an experience that people have, but it seems very obvious that, I can say anything I want to this because I'm not worried about the kind of the social norms of how I need to say things, or what are they going to think about me if I say this kind of stuff? So that was a very interesting awareness that I just had. And the second one was, look, even if somebody says, hey, I am dyslexic, I'm neurodivergent, whatever, that doesn't mean that the other person can now go, okay, let me switch into that mode to be able to understand what that person's going through. But the models can. So it's like you end up talking to somebody who has that awareness or something, I guess, a consciousness perhaps that has that awareness and is now like in taking in and processing your information with that understanding of this individual communicates in a certain way. I had never even thought about those two things before, and I think that's very fascinating.
Well, I think that you hit on a bigger, if we take that into two bigger things, one would be, you know, it's called masking in like the neurodivergent world, right? And that's just when you're putting your mask on to, or you're not showing all your cards.
Yeah,
So I would raise my hand, to go to the bathroom 2 times before it's my turn to read. I was the teacher's pet. I would do whatever I could to avoid certain situations. That way I could pick who was reading, those types of things. So there's the masking that it's good and bad. So if you need to use it as a coping mechanism, or you want to use it to have multiple personas, it can be great. We also know it can be abused, and it can be used in terrible ways to
sure.
create, the opposite of that effect as well too. So there's that's a very interesting conversation. And then the second part of being able to communicate is that there are a lot of neurodivergent thinkers, and they happen to be business owners. And there's a big correlation and connection between those two processes. That being said, when you go within a big company or a big organization, they are built on lateral or linear thinking models. And so when you start throwing in lateral thinkers, if they are not in a position to be able to think outside the box and share their true thoughts, opinions, personality, you're holding the company back in a lot of ways. We often will like hire those people to come in to be like the artist, or we hire those people to be like a subset, but not necessarily go out of our way to hire those people within the organization to be a disruptor or to think outside the box. And these tools are allowing that to happen. It is creating an opportunity to have those conversations, to go back and forth between lateral and linear thinkers. And that's huge within the company, because not only do you get to do that, but that's what these tools are great at doing themselves. So when we get to take my outside the box thoughts with your traditional thoughts, and then we get to say, now, what are all of those combinations that we can have between those concepts? That's where magic starts to happen. And I think that while it levels the playing field, it doesn't mean that you need to go hire all neurodivergent thinking people within your company, because that's going to be a disaster within itself. But it goes to show that there's a certain percentage of business that needs to revolve around change, and that change is constant. People
Especially
that
now.
are able to think in constant change along with these tools, when you can put that into the context that everybody else can understand in the slide deck from each department, then you can start to see some special things happening. It's the same thing that we went down this road with tech talk, and it was like you're speaking another language when you try to talk to the land administrator about why your
Yeah.
printer's not printing. And
Yeah.
so when you can be on the same language, it's magic when it happens. When you have no idea what they're saying, it's, so when you can take all those languages and kind of blend them together so that everybody understands, that's where I've seen how these businesses haven't been understanding the magic that it will happen, aside from saving time and making calls and doing some of the other great stuff that it does. There's a bigger picture of how it's going to help in the long term.
Let me ask, have you ever introduced the voice model into a conversation that you're having with someone else and let the model participate in that conversation, knowing your position and knowing the other person's position and actually provide feedback.
You know, it's funny. I haven't directly done it. I've demonstrated doing that. I've done it within the family and friends and that kind of stuff. I have not necessarily done it in a business perspective or a business setting yet. Um, that being said, it was you instantly get my mind wheels turning.
Yeah,
Uh,
right?
well, because the part of the magic is for this is when I'm not clear and concise, and I haven't been clear and concise in this conversation as well. That's just the way that my brain kind of bounces all over the place. Um, but I do know when I go back and look at this transcript for this conversation and I run it through other stuff that it gets me excited because there are conversations and pieces in here that I can connect the dots with other conversations I've had,
Mhm.
and it starts to show me where my interests are, the things I like to talk about, where conversations are going. But yeah, it's pretty magic. I think that like Notebook LM and the voice to text feature is
Yeah.
awesome. Within that, I do it on my newsletter. I will say that it's been difficult for me because I reverse engineered how I like to write my newsletter. But when you listen to my newsletter, it doesn't work well because I went bullet points. I went very short, concise language. It doesn't necessarily translate to the flow of conversation, right? So I'm now trying to figure out how I marry these different tools together. So it's how do I have a different newsletter and then instead of just being able to listen to that newsletter in what's a visually appealing format for somebody who's a dyslexic thinker who wants to see small chunked out stuff as opposed to how I like to listen and consume my content is two totally different things. And so, but the tool that plays my newsletter is going to just play that newsletter. So there's this interesting part that's going to happen right here where, and this is a part where the education fascinates me, is that we get to kind of create our own learning format, our own learning style within these models. They learn how we learn. So now when I like to consume in a podcast format, and then I like to read the book in this way, I like to use it through immersive reader so that it takes out all the background, maybe makes the font this color. It does these certain other things for you automatically just because it knows that that's how you like to learn
Wow.
and process that.
Yeah.
Those are the things that are kind of happening in the different ways that originally it was about personalized learning for dyslexic individuals. Well, that model is how every business should be running themselves. We should each know where we are, where we want to go, what the new steps are to get there. And when we put that into a model through HR and you get to reverse analyze where people are going and where they want to go as a business owner, it's magic too. There's a different tests, the Colby tests and these
Yeah.
personality tests. So when we can start to get sort of on these individualized learning paths, not just in school, but as well as business, because I look at business now as you're going through a 4-year career change for the rest of your life. My kids it's not go to college, get a degree, do that same job for the rest of your life. There's very few and far those jobs that are going to be left because they're
Yeah.
going to be easily replicatable. You need to be able to adjust, and it's going to be less than 4 years because we know that cycle is actually shorter than that in technology. But if we just put it around like this number that we know, 4 years, and if you're going to be working for 40 years, you've got 10 different career advancement changes of technology, of education. So you have to be a lifelong learner. You have to constantly be changing and evolving. It was almost impossible to track that before. Now we can track that and we can see those trends. And so that's going to be a huge part of not only education, but then how do we apply that to the business sector to keep, I mean, I'm 47 years old. If I don't stay up on this and everybody that's older than I am, I guarantee you that the kids that are in high school right now that are using these tools are going to come out of and they may not have the opportunity to use them in college, but as soon as they know how to apply them in the business world, That's who needs to be watching out right now. It's not we're going to lose the job. I'm not going to lose my job to AI. I'm going to lose my job to a younger generation person
Yeah.
that uses AI. I'm going to lose my job to somebody that's in another country that does not have internet access yet, that's going to have a large language model on this phone. And when we drop this
Yeah.
phone onto a continent that still doesn't have technology, and now you've got millions of people that are excited to have the technology and want to be where we are in the United States or other countries that have this technology, that's who we have to watch out for, because they are going to be motivated and they're going to have the means and the access and the knowledge that we don't have, and they want to be able to share it. And so I think that was part of my excitement for getting into this and having these conversations, was that it's not just about kids and education, and the younger conversations is about as a collective, where do we go and how do we use these tools? And anyway, so it gets me really excited.
That's an there's been a number of concepts that have been introduced in this call that I hadn't considered. Obviously, there's the benefit of geo arbitrage. I can pay in local currency and sell in USD. So there's a big win for me as a business owner in the US who's using offshore talent. But now those individuals, um, wow, I hadn't considered that their capabilities, as long as they're thinking in AI and they know how to use the tools, their capabilities could be on par with the master's degree candidate that I'm going to have to pay six figures to come in and do the same thing. So that's,
Yeah, and we've only seen that played out in certain locations still. So we've still got, there's still a lot of places that haven't quite figured that out yet, that will have an opportunity to. And when you're talking about having millions of minds, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. There's going to be a collective thought process there that is going to be beneficial for them to be able to share with everybody at large. That in itself is going to disrupt a lot of things. And the next thing for that is just that we get to have these conversations on a global level, and that within itself is just, it's mind-boggling to me that I can have so dyslexia wasn't something that I studied or understood. Honestly, I wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult. I knew that there was something wrong or with how I thought, or something off with how I thought, couldn't process it, couldn't explain it. But I didn't totally understood what that meant. When I start talking to people in other countries about the tools and stuff that we have, some of them are limited to the English language within
yeah.
itself. So
Yeah.
you're talking about just differences in language and how we can teach and process stuff. And so, again, these tools, with it being able to marry these languages and blend them all together, is going to create some opportunities that we haven't thought of, because we've never been able to have those conversations yet. And when we do, it's yeah, endless.
And I get so dialed in with, like, oh, I know how to use AI. And you think that you're good at it. And then you get introduced, you're like, oh my God, I hadn't even considered that or that or that.
There was one of the things that I do want to say that I find is very important for me, would be that, and one of the reasons why I stumbled on your program in particular, one was that you guys do talk a lot about the education process, and so that immediately piques my interest, because there's a lot of people that are talking from the marketing, from other specialties, and so that part got me excited. Um, the the part was that you do not need to be a technical
Yeah.
master to understand and use these tools. In fact, my premise is like, it's almost better when you don't. So by me
Agreed.
having these conversations in an unorthodox way is doing more to train the models than somebody that's mastering a prompt with specific language, like in the coding world, And trust me, I wanted to learn how to code because the first thing I thought Dyslexic.AI, I was going to learn how to use Python to code a large language model that was basically just built for dyslexic thinkers. And it was just a dyslexic LLM. And it was going to be super easy to be able to go in there and learn these processes. Well, that's not how my brain works. I reverse numbers and stuff constantly. It's like the complete opposite of the way my brain works. And so it was humbling, but at the same time, and it started to deter me a little bit because everybody was talking technical and everybody was talking in code language
Yep.
and those types of conversations. And the longer that I've been involved with it and the longer that I've stuck with it, I've realized that there's a really important conversation that needs to be in between those two. And so that person that is sitting down with the people to figure out what the prompts is cannot be the technical person that is just talking ones and zeros and ones and zeros and ones and zeros, because that's the same problem that we have in the creative world. So you need to be able to have that conversation that both people understand. I love being that intermediate person. I love being able to take what the natural language part is and explain it in a way that the coders understand or that the technical people understand, and then go back. And so that marriage between those conversations is super important. And I want people to know that you don't have to be super technical. You don't have to be good at spelling. You don't have to be great at typing. You don't have to have some of those traditional skill sets that we thought
I like it.
or that I thought that I personally needed to have to be
Yeah.
successful anymore. And so that was something that I thought that your message behind that was very important. And there wasn't
Awesome.
enough people that were willing to stand up and say that right now, because they're all fighting for the chief technical officer
Yeah.
people concept. And while that's great and we need that, it's a much bigger conversation. So
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, man, we're winging it, but it seems to be working for a lot of people. So I'd like to talk about what your plans are with Dyslexic AI.
well, right now it's keep hammering down on the content and just putting out stuff. I'm trying to, I um for every time that I think that I'm going to schedule stuff and get my act together so that I can have this no matter what daily. Honestly, I wing it myself,
Yeah,
and if there's something I want to talk about today, I'm gonna send out 2 articles. If there's nothing I want to talk about today, I'm not gonna feel guilty about not sending anything out. Um, so from that standpoint, I want to keep on having this conversation. The second piece is that um, I have been sharing my tools, my thoughts with other people. I do enjoy coaching and helping others. It's kind of been my passion. This I love working for myself. I love being able to create the content, but most honestly, I enjoy having the conversation. And there's nothing more fun for me than working on other people's projects than my own project. And that's
yeah,
just kind of been in my
that's common.
nature,
Yeah,
right? And so really, I've been helping a few business owners with what I'm doing. It was, hey man, this worked for me. I don't have all the answers to all of the problems, but it's a great place to start having the conversations. I can show you the tools I have. I can save you a lot of time on the systems that I've used and developed and that tech stack. So I see a lot more from that standpoint. I'd love to be able to help out more owners in that standpoint. It's really I focus on micro businesses, so small businesses leading into medium businesses, service based. I love coaching. I love solo entrepreneurs. I'm big into micro schools. So helping educators transition into being business owners. My degree was in recreation and business. So it was about taking your hobbies and your passions and the love for stuff and then finding a
nice.
way to turn it into your career. Um, so that conversation I really enjoy having. And then the next piece from that is I I would love to be able to build the talent and the team around me of outside the box neurodivergent thinkers to be fractional components to businesses, and not just chief AI officers, but whatever their specialty is, to be able to come in and have an opportunity to work for yourself, with other groups fractionally, or maybe even, full project or full time opportunities, but to be able to get a lot of other like-minded individuals into an opportunity where they can further pursue their careers and get started, but maybe just do it as a side thing or a way to get their own thing off the ground. And so kind of marrying that with VA, with a I have a personal assistant for a few hours a week. She specializes in neurodivergent thinking. So I take
Keep
that
up.
and sort of other people's mindsets like mine, and find ways to create opportunities for us. That would
Well, that's
be kind of my
fascinating.
dream right now. Yeah. So
Yeah. Well, Matt, thank you for this. This is it's definitely, like I said, I'm immersed in AI, and there's been a few concepts here that are going to require some more mental chewing on my part, but I think they're fascinating topics. And as I mentioned before we got on the call, we're very happy to have you as part of the community. I know how active you are in your own like growth pursuit when it comes to AI, and how generous you've been not only in the community but with the people that you're coaching. So if people want to find out more about in particular maybe the newsletter, what would be a good place or a good action for them to take?
yeah, Dyslexic.AI is you're gonna find my newsletter.
Okay.
I do link off to my personal website, and then the business website that we're kind of revamping will be linked off of there as well. And then really where I prefer to kind of carry most of my conversation is LinkedIn. So I found that
Yeah.
that's the most helpful tool for me. I am active on the other social media platforms, but if you find me on LinkedIn, I try to post all of my newsletter and content there daily, and
Oh,
have more
nice.
of a conversation there. I am trying to get better at taking those pieces and putting them out onto Instagram and some of those other platforms. But for me, LinkedIn's the best place to figure out where I'm at and what I'm doing, and then I keep that up to date with all of my other constant changes, or sort of ebbing and flowing.
Nice. Well, Matt, this has been awesome, and I appreciate the time and
Awesome,
the
Chris.
wake up that I've had on some of these topics. It's been fantastic. So,
Great.
everybody, thank you so much. Go follow Matt on LinkedIn. I know that I will be, and you can also find Matt's work, or at least his contributions in the Chief AI Officer community. There'll be a link in the show notes if you want to join that, and as well as a link to Vnote.AI and Dyslexic.AI in the show notes. So, everybody, thank you so much for dialing in. We're going to see you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to Using AI at Work. Don't forget to subscribe for more conversations about how to use AI at work. And a special thank you to our sponsor, Chief AI Officer, for empowering businesses with AI education and training. Visit their website for a free AI readiness assessment and AI strategy guide to help you get started using AI at work. That's www.chiefaiofficer.com. Special thanks to our producer, Evan DeSaulnier, for making this episode possible. Follow us on Twitter at the handle Using AI at Work, and visit www.usingaiatwork.com for free resources to help you harness AI in your role.